No matter how many times Amazon tried to spin things in their direction, no matter how often the mainstream media tried to protect this series, there's now no doubt in anyone's mind that the first season of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime Video, was a complete catastrophe. The most expensive TV series ever made. We're talking about $700 million wrapped up just in the first season, in 8 episodes. And not only was it a ratings disappointment, getting beat by House of the Dragon, which was a fraction of the cost of this series, but the fans also completely and wholeheartedly rejected it. You could see the audience score everywhere you go. It doesn't matter what website. It was an abomination. And of course, from the very beginning, they were put on their back foot by having to address the backlash. And of course, the showrunners, Amazon, everybody tried to just say it's racist. It's bigots that don't like this series. All the while, the majority of the conversation, the majority of the backlash actually centered around the fact that they told us this would be connected to Tolkien. They told us this would be Lord of the Rings. But at every single turn, whether it was with the diverse castings or whether it was just with the plot points, with what they decided to do with these characters and this world, it wasn't Tolkien. It was a bastardization of the lore of one of the most beloved stories we've ever heard. And now they're pretty much going in depth, in detail on how they ignored Tolkien and ignored the lore over and over again. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power showrunner explains why they decided to ignore Tolkien's writings and depict their own creation of Mordor. And like I said, when you did look at the backlash, one of the first things we saw before we actually knew what it was about, we heard the way they were talking about the cast members. We don't care what Tolkien wrote. We don't care how these characters were described. We don't care about the lore. We're going to cast diverse characters to represent modern audiences. That was the first indication that they didn't care about the lore. So that was one of the only things we had to talk about for a while. But once this show actually came out, there were so many other problems that became the focal point of everyone's ire because this series was a complete disaster. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power showrunner Patrick McKay explained why he and Prime Video decided to ignore Tolkien and depict their own creation of Mordor. So when you hear people try to say that this is a perfect adaptation, like this is incredible, they listen to Tolkien, it's connected to Tolkien, it's not. It's just blatantly not. And this article does a great job of breaking this down. McKay spoke to The Hollywood Reporter about the show's 6th episode that showed the orcs dug a giant tunnel into the heart of a volcano. The tunnel was then filled with water after a dam broke, after the massive flood of water made contact with burning hot lava, creating an explosion that destroyed much of the surrounding land and covered it in ash. And the way that all played out was ridiculous and stupid. The fallout that they had to deal with was really dumb, and people roasted this. But more so than it just being stupid, it's completely contrary to the lore. By the show's 8th and final episode, Halbrand is revealed to be Sauron, and Mordor is shown covered in black with Mount Doom still billowing out smoke and lava pouring down its side. McKay explained the scene saying, "A huge theme in Tolkien is the environmentalism and the way machines and industrializations destroys the land. We wanted to be central and core all the time. It's a thing that comes up again and again. So in the writer's room, we asked, what if Mordor was beautiful, like Switzerland? And then what happened that could transform it? We talked about the poisoning of the land. Then you find out about the tunnels being dug and sulfur going in the air. It all builds toward this geologically realistic way of igniting the mountain, which now blacks out the sky for a practical reason. Adar, our villain, another made-up character, sees the orcs as his people, and they deserve a home where the sun doesn't torment them. We're hoping it will take people by surprise. Yes, subvert your expectations. Surprise you by going contrary to the lore, because time and time again in Tolkien's works, it describes Mordor not like that. This is one example of people taking something that Tolkien did do, right? What was happening to the countryside? What was happening with the Industrial Revolution? What was happening with industrialization of the world and what it was doing to nature, right? They take that thing that Tolkien did write about, that he did talk about in some of these books, and they decide to make it, what should we do for modern day? We need to take this thing and ignore all the nuance, ignore what he wrote, ignore everything about what Tolkien actually wrote about this, and make shit up. That's exactly what they did. However, this is not how Mordor came to be at all. In fact, the land was not idyllic like Switzerland. It had been repeatedly hammered by the eruption of Mount Doom over the years and was thus the desolate readers and viewers of The Lord of the Rings knew. In The Peoples of Middle-earth, Christopher Tolkien writes in the notes section, the name Mordor was maybe already an elvish name for that region because of its volcanic Orodrun and its eruptions, which were not made by Sauron, but were a relic of the devastating works of Melkor in the Long First Age. In the Silmarillion, Tolkien details that Sauron made Mordor his home because of the volcano, because it already existed, because it was already there. There, in the valley of Gorgoroth, was built his fortress vast and strong, Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower. And there was a fiery mountain in the land that the elves named Orodruin. Indeed, for that reason, Sauron had set there his dwelling long before, for he used the fire that welled there from the heart of the earth in his sorceries and his forging. In the midst of the land of Mordor, he had fashioned the ruling ring. And paragraph after paragraph in this article is showing that this is not how Mordor was made, that it was there long before, and that this is an absolute joke. But it is just one more example. And like we said, everyone can try to cover for it. They can try to pretend like this wasn't a disaster. They can just move ahead with season 2 with announcing all these new, even more diverse castings and say everything's great, guys. But that is just false. That is just not the reality. We have seen the verified ratings numbers, the verified streaming numbers for Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. It needed to be a massive global phenomenon, and it was not. It dropped off the face of the earth after it aired. It lost nearly 40% of its audience after that first episode. It was a disaster from the beginning. And now we're continuing to see, and these shoulders continue to be exposed for the hacks that they are. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.